a webinar on operational excellence in the food industry, which I wanted to do. I've been wanting to do it for a while because some industries are a little bit different from other things, and I do find that people, media, consultants talk too much about as if everybody was making cars, and some people do something completely different, and that's the case with the food industry. I'm Philip Maris. I'm English but European. Work that one out. I live in Paris, France, where Maris Consulting is based, although half our work is all over the world. I've been involved in operational excellence ever since I discovered Lean in 1984. I'll let you do the calculations of how many years ago that was. A bit later, I was hired by Eliyahu Goldratt, the author of The Goal, founder of Theory of Constraints, and I've been mixing in Lean, Theory of Constraints, Six Sigma, Agile, and all sorts of other stuff in industry for many years now. As we work in all kinds of industries, we're very curious. We love going from one environment to something completely different. Today we're going to be talking about food, but as you can see, we work in all kinds of transport, from the bicycle, the motorbike, the car, the train, the plane, food, and pharmaceuticals. There's some overlap there, which we'll be talking about today. Half our work is outside of France. We're about 500 assignments now. And we do webinars. This is one of them. Conferences, training sessions, and so forth, all over the place, on the theory of constraints, on Lean, on critical change project management, logical thinking process, and other stuff. I'm going to talk about the food industry. Please forgive me. It's, there's a very sub parts of the food industry, and obviously I'm going to frustrate some of you. You're going to say, this is not us or whatever, or you didn't talk about this. I have to choose what we're going to talk about today, but obviously the food industry is the food and the beverages, the seasonal fluctuations for some of you anyway, for Easter, Christmas and stuff. Some of you are owners of your raw materials, and therefore the business model is a bit different. And of course, for some, if not many of you, you're victims of fluctuations in the prices of raw materials as they go up and down, sometimes very violently, sometimes just a little bit. I won't be talking about that aspect of things today. Just a little comment. We're talking about operational excellence. That's our historical business, Maris Consulting. But today, about half our work is in project management, especially new product development. And we've done a lot of new product development in the food industry and industrialization in the food industry and stuff. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. We're just going to be talking about operational excellence. Just to dive into some concrete stuff. One of our clients had fairly big seasonal peak around Christmas, right, because of the Christmas meals and stuff. 15th of November to the 15th of December, preparing for the Christmas season, they had about a double month, and so that at that stage they were completely a bottleneck. They didn't have enough production capacity. Therefore, of course, to minimize the anticipation that they were forced to do to meet the peak demand, they wanted to get more capacity out of their factory. So we had a look and found the bottleneck. The bottleneck was the cooking in these autoclave ovens that you can see here. We worked on increasing the throughput, increasing the performance of these 4 autoclaves. So what did we do? We had a look. We did about a 3-hour diagnostic, watching how everything was operating, and built an action plan with the workers there. This is a summary of what was in there. There was a bit more, but these are the main points. Okay. One of them was an alert system, an and-on system, warning the operators that the cooking was going to be finished and they would soon have to unload these things. These things here, these cages are full of food, right? So they put these cages inside these big autoclave machines, right? Put a little bit of water in, heat it up, and have a little bit of pressure, and then cook it at a certain temperature for a certain time. Okay. And then they unload it and go to the next batch. So the operators here had to do that, but they had another part of production next door, so they weren't sitting there watching these machines, right? They had to unload and unload these things, but they had other things to do as well. The and-on was just the alert to warn people, watch out, this batch is going to be finished soon, please come and prepare yourself to unload me. And then we did a lot of SMED, single minute exchange of die, reducing changeover times. How long did it take until the moment they opened the door here, took the stuff out and put the new batch in, closed the door and started the new cycle, right? It was over 20 minutes to do that. And so we worked on reducing that time. We standardized the supports, these things on wheels here that they put the racks on, pushed them in and so forth. Because of unevenness in the ground levels, they weren't exactly interchangeable. There were, a couple of centimeters difference between one and the other. So we standardized all that so that they could then have a train of these cages going in and out rather than taking them cage by cage, and preparing, therefore, the sequence of the next batch properly. they had 2 people in this part of the workshop, okay, but in fact it was quite easy to get an extra person to come from another part of the factory that was just behind the wall over here somewhere. And so they worked with 3 people during the peak season. That enabled them to work a bit faster. It wasn't a problem because in that adjacent workshop, by definition, were theory constraint guys, right? The other workshop was a non-bottleneck, had excess capacity. We looked at exactly how they were filling these cages, and we found that for historical reasons, they'd stopped using, for some references, the top row and the bottom row of these cages. We asked, why did you do that? It was a rule that was no longer valid. So we found another solution to enable the entire oven to be filled properly so as not to waste space and therefore capacity. A few little things like working on some of the door handles that were unreliable, stuff like that. Another piece of work which was they had 76 different cooking recipes, which meant that sometimes they didn't have enough of one particular product of one particular recipe, and they were not filling properly these autoclave ovens. So we simplified, reduced the number of recipes a little bit to avoid having partially filled autoclave ovens. The sum of all that was that the changeover times dropped from over 20 minutes to less than 4 minutes. And so we got over 30, nearly 40% extra production out of these resources. Since they were the bottleneck of the factory, that meant 35% more production out of the entire 300-person factory by doing this. Okay, this is just theory constraints. Have a look at our other videos if you're not understanding this. The constraint is what determines the performance of the system. Therefore, you need to concentrate on that, and that's what we've just done here with this example in some food industry cooking some food. This, I hesitate whether to put it in this section about the food industry or in the more general remarks, but I have decided to keep it here. SMED. I don't know why it's shameful that my company could still be selling SMED to people. I mean, it's been around since the Second World War. It was one of the first things that Toyota was known for, a single minute exchange of die. Okay, when they used it, it was for car doors in there, and so you'd have to adapt it. But everybody can adapt it. It's a question of changing your management attention, your focus from when the machine is running, how fast is it running, and so forth, to also keeping that same amount of management attention and focus to the changeovers and thinking, how can I improve it? In the food industry, it's making the machines easier to clean. And when you have little sharp edges like this, right, if this is some kind of part of the machine, you have to scrub here when you switch from one product to another. Well, change the design of the different parts of the machine so they're easier to clean. Give people proper lighting, proper tooling, proper brushes and stuff so that they can clean it quickly. People are treating cleaning a machine as if it was a non-industrial operation. Okay, it's badly done, frankly. It's not just a question of speed. It's badly done because it's not easy to do and it wastes a lot of time. So please have a look at how you clean your machines. We use SMED process when these machines are fairly complicated, which is to understand that the changeover is not just a one-person job. It's a 2, 3, 4 people. Maybe the maintenance people are there also. So it's a team effort, and therefore you might want to do a little bit of simplified project management to reduce the changeover times. Every single time we've had to work in the food industry, we've been working on the SMED, and often it was really easy to do because they'd been ignoring this, and it's sad because it's part of the business. Now, in most food industries, you can't let the products sit around on the factory floor for 1 month because it'll rot. And this is not true in manufacturing parts for an aeroplane, right? You can leave something sitting around for a month or two, nothing's going to happen. And so they do, because they do. In the food industry, you generally can't, and therefore it's good for your health. That's to say that you have a better culture with regards to managing flow. You don't let things sit in your workshops for days, right? It does make the spotting of bottlenecks a little bit more difficult because the traditional classical way of finding your bottlenecks in your system is to find large queues, and we can find queues that are several weeks of work stuck in front of the bottleneck. In the food industry, or most of the food industry, you're not going to find that for health and safety reasons, and so it's going to make the spotting of the bottlenecks a little bit more complicated. Okay, but it's the same basic idea. Watch out if you come and tell me that it's in your packaging, and when I look at the packaging I see that it's getting stuck because there's a lack of communication between marketing and production. They've got some crazy packaging, very complicated, more or less impossible to do right at the back end before it going out to the truck, and that is what is causing the problem. It's the packaging has become too complicated. If you're doing fancy packaging, which you often have to do, make sure that it is doable and not going to be the production's nightmare. I say that because it's just happens too often. Food industries are by nature V plants. It's part of the V, A and T type of plants of the theory of constraints. You have a limited number of raw materials coming into the factory that are going to be transformed, processed, and end up with a much larger range of finished goods, different quantities, different cooking, different labels, different preparations. So it's a transformation, but this is specific because managing flow in these kinds of organization is different from an assembly dominated manufacturing. And it means that, for instance, the possibilities of pull flow control are limited, and it's also limited if you don't control the raw materials coming in. And if you're the owners of the cows or owners of the apples, you're not buying them, therefore you can't stop buying them if you don't need them, then you're not going to pull the flow because the material is just arriving anyway. So it's pushed or dropping on you. That's got to be taken into account when you're designing the right flow control mechanisms. Material yield. People in the food industry know how much it costs often, the material yield. I put this here because I still find that in about 2/3, if not more, of our assignments in the food industry, we have to tell them you're not taking material yield importantly enough. You're not doing a good enough job on material yield. One of the reasons is unfortunately that people coming from manufacturing have this obsession with OEEs, keeping the machines running all the time, and so they will do that. They will try to keep everybody busy all over the place to the detriment of material yield, and therefore the machines might run nice numbers on the OEEs and stuff, but they're wasting material by trying to go too fast. So watch out. When you set up for a new production and stuff, you should really be trying to do that. You get it right first time, and the material yield is very good, because too often in the setup process, in the first 5 minutes of a new batch on a particular process, you're going to find a poor material yield because you went and did it too quickly. So try and work out how you can improve that. It's more difficult in this business than in industry where you're steel or aluminium or paper or whatever, because your raw materials coming in have variability. The obvious example is the fat content in beef, which will vary from one day to another, from one animal to another, and therefore the yields figures are going to vary. And so you have to have an intelligent, honest discussion at all levels of the organization about the level of yield, because sometimes it's because of inefficient processes internally, sometimes it's just the raw materials that you bought. And so you need to keep a very good, open and constructive dialogue on the subject. And it's more difficult because of the variability of the raw materials. My most spectacular seasonality assignments in my career have been in the food industry. I'm talking about it, but obviously there are, toys for Christmas have the same kind of thing, or people who sell Christmas trees for Christmas have high seasonality. But in the food industry, the ice creams for summers and chocolates for Easter and all these sorts of things, and the amount of food eating, at least in France, that goes on at the end of the year means that there are peaks. So you need to anticipate that properly. When I say proper forecasting tools, I'm not saying sophisticated forecasting that tries to guess the exact product mix and stuff, right? But something that enables you to decide exactly how much you should be trying to anticipate the level of demand if it exceeds your capacities, which probably it will be. More importantly, given that what's going to happen to you, you need to have already decided what your different levels of staffing are to do 100 tons, to do 200 tons, to do 300 tons, to do 400 tons, right? So there's the off-season setup, then there's the mid-season setup with different people doing different things, and a third level and a fourth level. Everything is prepared. You don't have to ask yourself, what do I do if I get to 200? You just turn on the system. So that means you have to hire quickly 5 extra people, and these people move to here, those people move to there, and whatever. You don't reinvent your solution when your demand is significantly above your capacity, right? It's not, you don't improvise that. And please, this is just going to get worse and worse year by year. So make sure that you're not panicking and doing this badly. You need to keep ahead of this, because it's going to get more and more impressive from year to year, right? A few remarks specific to the food industry. In many of the production areas, you've got quite a lot of dress code restrictions. So, you have to put equipment on to get into the manufacturing areas and take them off when you get out. This can limit the amount of time that management and support functions spend on the shop floor, and yet, and this is just me and Lee, I guess, Gemba, everybody should be regularly on the shop floor, including accounting, including human resources, and so forth and so forth. So don't use that excuse to not go out and spend every day some time on the shop floor among the production people to understand what's going on, see how you can help to be a support function. Number 2, scheduling software. Because of the nature of production, batch sizes, batch cooking, and so forth, there are quite a few constraints in the system, and people are therefore tempted to try and have this scheduling software which takes into account all the constraints that you have. It can work, but in 9 cases out of 10 it doesn't work very well at all. On paper, initially maybe you can get some nice results, but probably 5 years later it'll turn into a big mess. So watch out. Don't be ashamed of still doing some of the scheduling by hand. If you're doing it by hand, make sure that the people who are often some of the most experienced, know the factory the best, are well managed. There's a good formalization or writing up of the rules that they're applying and so forth. Point number 3 may be marked by what happened to here in France, in Brittany last summer, where it got very, very hot very, very quickly, and a lot of the food industry got into difficulty trying to keep everything cool enough. Keep ahead of this, right? Try and prepare your systems, both your factory, your warehouses, your trucks and stuff, to make sure that you can get from your factory to your clients, even if it's 45 or 50 degrees Celsius outside, right? You need to make sure that you have the equipment that is set up to be able to deal with that and stay within the legal boundaries of temperatures. If you are surrounded by other industries, in particular automotive, where they're weakening, they're reducing headcounts and stuff, that's an opportunity for you to hire some people, get some people back into your system. I find, and I'm saying this because if I say it this way, it's because I find it nearly every time, I do find that in the food industry, people have an inferiority complex. They say, hey, it smells here, it's not clean, it's cold. Who would want to work in our industry? And that they have an inferiority concept. I've worked in all sorts of places, and I can tell you that a mine is not very cool. Underground mine is pretty tough too. A welder behind his mask welding all day is pretty tough. There are many, many tough jobs in the world and in production. Don't think you can't attract people into your business. I really think that you can do a lot more to get really good people to join you in your industries. That's my specifics about the food industry. There's another lovely case that I love by Spiros, where he describes with a lot of humor how he tripled production of halloumi cheese in Cyprus using the theory of constraints. Have a look at one of the videos on the YouTube channel of Maris Consulting. Let me talk about an example from McDonald's France, 1,500 restaurants, 70,000 people. They went from their make-to-stock model to a make-to-order model, made for you. And in 2015, when they did that, it broke the speed of service, it broke the profitability, and so they had to reinvent themselves. We helped them to do that. We did that by making sure that they worked order by order and stopped local optimums. Like the person in the kitchen saying, hey, we've got 3 cheeseburgers, I'll do 3 cheeseburgers. But they were for 3 different client orders. That desynchronized the flow, made a big mess. So we said, let's work order by order. And indeed, we implemented the tray in the kitchen. They would start doing one tray after another, one order after another. Also, the kitchen would pull the work into the kitchen. Previously, they had a KPI that said that counted the number of seconds between the moment the client ordered it and the moment the kitchen started on it. The idea being that the faster the kitchen started on it, the faster they would finish. It just made a big mess in the kitchen. And so we switched to pull. We did some other stuff on better using the meat cooking schedules and stuff, some management routines and other stuff. The result was we nearly halved the service times in these restaurants. Have a look at the video by Eric Bisson of McDonald's. So other remarks on operational excellence. I see it everywhere, but it's more often the case in many of the food industries, maybe not in the beverage so much. There are production lines, right? People are using their hands and transforming the food or cutting it or whatever. They're on a production line. Okay, when you're on a production line, you need to stop and think about how you allow the people doing the work to contribute to the process of ongoing improvement. Again, this is pure lean, pure Toyota. How can you get all their ideas that they're going to accumulate as they do the work about how they can improve things, improve the step, improve this tooling, improve that, whatever it is. Okay, to do that, you have to give them time. So it's either setting 2 hours on every Wednesday morning where you stop the production and you do some improvements, or you rotate people out so that they can spend a week on improvement actions and stuff. Please, if you have a situation in which a lot of your labor is on a production line using their hands all the time, and you're not allowing them to stop doing the production to carry out improvements, stop and think, because surely that's completely a no-go with regards to Kaizen improvement actions led by people who are doing the work and stuff, right? If you don't understand how to do that, have a look at, for instance, at the Toyota model, because Toyota assembly plants, anyway, have exactly that. We've got a lovely example here in France where they're making small cars, the Yaris. In that environment, they don't have time to stop and solve a problem or whatever, but they do and they're very good at it because they have spare capacity to stop and contribute to improvement actions. Automation. I say this to everybody all the time, everywhere. I don't understand why people haven't understood. In the original writings of describing Toyota's way of doing things was automation, to make the processes more autonomous. And this happens all over the place, right? It's just as true in aeronautics as in food industry. But people are not doing it enough, and that's crazy because especially in countries with high labor costs, right? You want to make sure that you're getting the most out of the people. To do that, you want to make sure that one person is not supervising one machine, but why not 2 machines, 3 machines, 4 machines, right? This is what Toyota was born from before they started making cars with the loom and stuff. But what does it mean concretely? And maybe there'll be questions about this. You want to watch and make sure that the people not having to step in and do stuff on a process too frequently, because that's why they're being hooked in or tied up to a machine, right? It's because every 70 seconds they have to supply it with paper bags or with plastic bags here, or check this or do that, or take a pallet out. Automation is to make sure that the machine can run for longer and longer and longer without human intervention. Make it autonomous. Make your machines autonomous so that you can get one person to supervise more processes. Maintenance, this is just a universal one. It's getting harder and harder to find the right people, the right capabilities, the right qualities to do good maintenance in factories, right? You should not outsource it, subcontract it, right? I know some people do, they always regret it, but all the best companies in the world don't. Toyota, of course, doesn't subcontract. You need to do this, and it's hard because you're looking for people who are very good at problem solving. They're prepared to work night shift, and they have to be good technically, broad technical skills in electronics, mechanical, whatever, IT more and more. And they have to be, really good at problem solving, root cause analysis and stuff. You're likely to end up with shortages in your maintenance teams and problems of no longer really mastering how your machines and automation systems work. So watch out. I say this to many industries in pharmaceuticals, for instance. It's also a big issue. Watch out, maintenance can be a killer. Keep your eye on maintenance. Skills that are different to recruit, and again, this is something where we're seeing in many other areas. In the nuclear aerospace industry, they're running out of welders, or in the aircraft industry, they're running out of mechanics to maintain aircraft, right? It's not specific, but let's have a look at the food industry. In the food industry, there are not enough butchers, right, to cut the meat in the food industry, that sort of stuff, right? What do you do if that's the case? Well, first, you have to realize that your management attention should be on the subject. The recruitment of butchers becomes important, and therefore you have to make sure that you find the right people. To do that, don't forget to do your brand marketing and make sure that the right people will call up or be interested in coming to work for you, right? For one of our clients, they didn't have enough butchers. I looked at the Indeed profile. It's a well-known recruitment platform where employees can mark their employers and say whether they enjoyed working there or not. In this particular company, it was a fantastic company with people who'd been there for 30 years. Everybody loved it. Their Indeed profile was catastrophic because they didn't manage it, right? When you looked at it from the outside, it looked like a place to avoid at all costs because there were just 10 very negative reviews and no positive reviews again. That's easy to change. Make sure that you look good and you attract good talent. You might have upstream constraints. I'm not going to talk about them too much here because it would need a webinar on its own. We could apply throughput accounting to it and whatever. What I can say is make sure that you try and make it as much as business as usual. As I say, when you do have raw material constraints, whether it's not having enough or them being very expensive, make sure that the process is as fluid as possible and that it doesn't require the top management attention. Too often I find that the permission to buy meat at 40% above the normal price has to go right up to the boss. Make sure that you have a written down process that says if it's 20% more, you can decide that some part of those decisions are automated and top management is not micromanaging the subject, even if it's important. Be careful of not letting these kinds of problems and tensions get into the workshop. It's part of the business, but if it shouldn't create unnecessary tension within the shop floor. To conclude, one of the most shocking things one sees in the food industry is that when there's a production line where people are actually doing the work with their hands, cutting up the fish or whatever, and they just do that 8 hours a day, they're never solicited. How could you improve the process, right? There's no bottom-up improvement processes, no Kaizen. So either you think that Toyota is wrong or Toyota only applies to cars and all that sort of stuff. Stop and think. Are you giving your employees the opportunity to tell you all the good ideas they've accumulated over the past 5 years doing their work down there on the shop floor? Okay. Be careful of maintenance. This is just becoming horribly complicated, and you're seeing, you sometimes buy some nice looking machines with some automation and stuff, but then you don't have anybody in house that knows how to fix them or maintain them. Material yields are very important. I know you're aware of that, but how come when I visit a company, I still find they're not managing it well enough and they could do better and make more money by reducing waste in that domain. Don't neglect automation. Think about how one person could do more, control a larger part of the processes. How often do they have to go back and fill up the packaging in the assembly line and that sort of stuff. Okay, you can probably attract talent a lot more than you thought. You have an inferiority complex. Again, forgive me for those it's not true, but I've worked in many different industries and I see that. To conclude, I didn't know where to put it. I'm mad about fear constraints. So your bottlenecks, find your bottlenecks, manage your bottlenecks, and very often on those bottlenecks, there's one of the issues is reduction of setup times. Okay, if you like this webinar, there's some training sessions in-house or online on all this stuff. Have a look at our website. Also, if you're interested in what kind of work we do, we often start by doing a rapid 2-day diagnosis of your factory, and we end up with an action plan. Those are very popular. We get very, very positive feedback. So if you're interested, invite us over to have a look at your factory. Let's say 2 days. On the afternoon of the second day, we give you our feedback on your strengths, your weaknesses, and an action plan. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.